I can't go back, not won't, can't. There's a real difference, and it took me a while to understand. I don't mean I don't want to. Some days I want to more than anything, more than I'd ever say out loud to my own daughter. I mean the door actually closed on me, quietly, without me ever once deciding it should. There's a whole community of us out here who look from a distance like we're living some kind of postcard. Nobody in that postcard ever tells you this part. I'm not saying this for sympathy. I've got a good life, genuinely. But once I walk you through the actual numbers, you'll understand exactly why I mean can't, not won't.
My name's Jerry. Gerald, technically, but nobody's called me that since my mother was alive. I'm 73 years old, and for 31 years I managed a hardware and farm supply co-op outside Dayton, Ohio. Not the guy with the paid-off beach house already lined up, not somebody who spent decades dreaming about palm trees over a spreadsheet at his desk. I sold nuts and bolts and fertilizer and extension cords to the same 300 families for 3 decades. I knew whose tractor needed which belt, whose kid was heading off to state that fall, whose marriage was quietly falling apart by the way they bought their weed killer alone instead of together like they used to. That was my whole world, and I liked it. I wasn't chasing anything when all this started. I want that understood clearly, right up front. My wife, Diane, passed 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer, caught late, gone in under a year. We'd been married 38 years. After she died, I kept the house another 2 years, mostly because I didn't know what else to do with myself. My daughter Kelly, she's 41 now, married, 2 boys. She was 4 states away with her own life, her own noise, and I understood that. I wasn't angry about it. That's just what grown children's lives look like. You raise them so they don't need you every day, and then one day they don't. Here's the thing about how I ended up in Cebu. I didn't decide to move there. I want to be honest about that, because I think people assume there was some big plan, some spreadsheet, some dream I'd been chasing. There wasn't. An old Navy buddy of mine, a guy named Pete Longcar, had been living outside Cebu City for maybe 8 years by then, and he kept telling me to come visit. So 2 winters after Diane died, I finally did. I told Kelly I'd be gone 3 weeks. 3 weeks turned into 5. 5 turned into, well, let me just see what the rainy season's like. And somewhere in there, without any single moment where I sat down and made a decision, I stopped booking a return flight. I didn't decide to move. It just happened. The way water finds the low spot in a yard without anybody pouring it there. The first apartment I rented was a 1-bedroom in a neighborhood called Talamban, a little north of the busy part of the city. Modest place, tile floors, a window unit that rattled, about 19,000 pesos a month, which at the time worked out to somewhere around $350. My landlady is a woman named Nana, 60-something, sharp as a tack, runs 3 rental units on the same street, and remembers everyone's business better than they do. Every Sunday morning she leaves a small bag of pandesat, that's the local bread, soft little rolls, hanging on my doorknob. Never asks for anything back. I tried to pay her for it once, first year I was there, and she looked at me like I'd insulted her. There's a rhythm to that street I could describe for an hour. The tricycle drivers idling at the corner in the morning heat, engines ticking as they cool. the smell of someone frying garlic rice 2 doors down. And under it, always, the wet concrete smell that never fully leaves a tropical city, even between rains. A rooster that has never once, in 4 years, crowed at a reasonable hour. I used to think it was broken, honestly, until Nana informed me that particular rooster belongs to nobody in particular and answers to no schedule but its own. A little sorry store. That's a small home-front convenience shop, usually just a window cut into the front of somebody's house, run by a woman named Marites, where I started buying my coffee and canned goods because it was closer than the grocery, and because, if I'm being honest, she had a laugh I found myself inventing reasons to hear again. I should tell you about Marites, because she's the reason a lot of the rest of this story exists. She's 58, a widow herself, 3 grown kids of her own. We started as customer and shopkeeper, then as 2 people who talked longer than the transaction required, and eventually, I'm using the word loosely because it doesn't quite translate, as partners. Not married. We've talked about it, and honestly, the paperwork terrifies both of us more than the commitment does. Her family folded me in without much ceremony. Her grandson calls me Tatai Jerry now. Tatai meaning father, more or less. And nobody ever sat me down and explained the moment that happened. It just happened. The same way the move itself happened. Now, I want to be straight with you because this isn't a brochure. The first year was hard in ways nobody warned me about. The heat is a different animal than anything Ohio prepared me for. I had a heat rash across my back for 6 straight weeks that first summer that no amount of powder or fan seemed to touch. The language barrier is smaller than people think, because English is spoken everywhere in the Philippines, genuinely everywhere. But there's still a loneliness in not being able to follow the fast, easy Cebuano jokes flying around a table. You're present, but you're a half-second behind the joke, always. And then there was the typhoon. My second year, a big one came through. Knocked the power out for 4 straight days, water pooling in the street outside my building. Nana's youngest son wading out with a flashlight to check on everybody on the block. I sat in my apartment in the dark, no fan, sweat-soaked, genuinely scared for the first time since Diane's diagnosis, and I remember thinking, this is not what the brochure showed me. The brochure shows you the beach at sunset. It doesn't show you 4 days without power wondering if your ceiling's about to give. That's the real version versus the brochure version. Both are true at once. I want you to hold on to that because it matters for what's coming. Now, I know some of you have been waiting this whole time for the catch. I can feel it through the screen, honestly. You're sitting there thinking, okay, palm trees, cheap rent, a nice lady down the street. When's the other shoe going to drop? And here's the thing. I've never actually said the next part out loud before. Not to Kelly, not even to Marites, not in so many words, though I think she's known it longer than I have. Let's be honest with each other for a minute. This video isn't really about Cebu being wonderful, even though it is. It's about something I worked out on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, alone, at my own kitchen table, with a legal pad and a calculator, and 2 years' worth of avoidance finally running out. That's the part nobody warns you about. Not the visa paperwork, not the electricity bill. The math itself. The actual, cold, specific math of what it would cost to come home. It started small, the way these things do. Kelly had mentioned offhand on a video call that she wished I lived closer. Not moved in with her, nothing that dramatic, just closer, so the boys could know me better than a face on a screen twice a month. And I hung up that call and sat there a long time. And something in me thought, well, why don't I just check? Just to know. Not because I'd decided anything, just because a man likes to know his own numbers. I want to tell you, too, that I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not qualified to tell you what you should do with your own money, your own life, your own family. I'm just telling you what happened when I did the arithmetic on mine. Some of these numbers will be close to yours, some won't be, because everybody's Social Security check is different, everybody's hometown is different, everybody's health is different. But the shape of it, the shape of what I found, I think that part's more universal than people want to admit. I'd avoided doing this math for 2 solid years, if I'm being honest. Not because I was scared of what it would say about money. I think, underneath it, I was scared of what it would say about me, about whether I'd built a real life here, or just wandered into a long vacation I never bothered to end. That's a harder question to sit with than any number on a spreadsheet, and I think that's exactly why I put it off as long as I did. So let me walk you through exactly what I found, because that's not the real math most people run when they think about affording to come home. The real math is uglier and quieter than a monthly budget line. It was a Tuesday. I remember that specifically because Tuesdays are when Meritess does inventory at the store, so I had the apartment to myself for a few hours, which almost never happens. Rainy season, that heavy gray rain that doesn't so much fall as just sit on the whole city for an afternoon. I made coffee, got out a yellow legal pad, the same kind I used to order pallets of for the co-op, if you can believe that, and I started writing down numbers. Housing first, because housing's always first. My rent in Talamban runs right around 19,000 pesos a month, depending on the exchange rate that week. Call it $330, give or take. I looked up, and I want to be careful here because rent numbers move around depending on the source and the year, but the average rent across 100 U.S. cities recently sits somewhere around $1,800 a month. Now, I'm not going back to some coastal city, I know that. Dayton's not California. But even in a modest Midwestern town, you're commonly looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,200 a month for a decent one-bedroom. Maybe a little less if you get lucky, maybe more if you don't. That's already 3 to 4 times what I pay now for a smaller space in a colder climate, with no nena bringing me bread on Sunday mornings. Then, transportation. Here in Cebu, I don't own a car. Haven't in 4 years. I take what's called Grab. It's like an app-based taxi, similar to what you might know as a ride-share back home. And most months, that runs me somewhere around 5,000 to 10,000 pesos. Call it $100 to $180. Back in Ohio, at 73 years old, I'd need a car, full stop. There's no walking to anywhere that matters in most of the towns I know. And car insurance for a driver my age is running, from what I could find, somewhere around $2,400 a year. Call it $200 a month. And that's before gas, before maintenance, before the inevitable morning the transmission goes. So I put it side by side, right there on the legal pad. Housing and transportation alone, Cebu. Maybe $450 to $500 a month total, comfortably. Housing and transportation alone, small town Ohio. $1,400 a month, conservatively, before I've eaten a single meal or seen a single doctor. And here's where it gets uglier. Because I hadn't even gotten to health care yet, and health care's the one that really stops you cold at 73. I'm on Medicare, which is a genuine blessing, don't misunderstand me. But Medicare isn't free, and it isn't complete. Once you add a Part D drug plan and a supplement policy, what they call Medigap, a lot of people I've read about are looking at something like $400 a month just in premiums, before a single copay, before a single test. And that's assuming nothing serious happens. One real estimate I came across suggested a healthy person retiring around 65 could expect to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $170,000 on health care over the rest of their life, and that's not counting anything catastrophic. Here in Cebu, a private doctor's visit runs somewhere around $15 to $35. No appointment drama, same day, usually. Common prescriptions cost a fraction of what they run back home, too, from what I've seen and heard from other expats here. It's not free, and it's not the same safety net Medicare provides if something truly catastrophic happens. I want to be honest about that trade, because it cuts both ways, and it's worth anybody considering this seriously checking the current health care and insurance realities for themselves, rather than taking one retired hardware manager's word for it. But the day-to-day cost of just being a person who occasionally needs a doctor is a fraction of what it is back home. So I added it all up. My Social Security check, and again, everybody's is different. Mine reflects 31 years at a hardware co-op, not a corner office. Mine comes in right around what I understand is close to the national average these days, somewhere around $2,000 a month. Here in Cebu, that check alone covers my rent, my grab rides, my groceries, my electric bill, which, by the way, is no joke. The Philippines has some of the highest electricity rates in this part of the world, so that one surprised me too. My coffee at Marites's store, and I still put something aside most months. Back in Ohio, that same check wouldn't cover rent and a car payment. Just those two things. Before food, before Medicare premiums, before anything else a life actually requires. Now here's the part where I did what I think anybody in my position does. I tried to make the math work anyway. I ran the worst-case version. What if I moved into my sister Carol's basement in Springfield? No car, no lease of my own, just existing there, walking to whatever I could reach on foot. And even then, even in the leanest, smallest version I could draw up, it wasn't a life. It was a holding pattern. It was surviving in someone else's spare room at 73 years old, dependent in a way I hadn't been since I was 19. And that wasn't even the hardest part, if you can believe it. The hardest part was the paperwork side, the stuff that doesn't show up on a legal pad as a dollar figure. I haven't had a U.S. address in 4 years. My credit history has gone quiet. Not bad, just silent. The way a phone line goes dead instead of busy. Nobody's going to hire a 73-year-old former co-op manager back into anything resembling his old trade. And I understood that the moment I wrote it down. And even the visa and residency side of things over here. The retirement visa I hold comes with its own rules about deposits and paperwork that took me the better part of a year to fully understand. And those rules can change without much warning, which is its own kind of quiet unease you learn to live with. There's another wrinkle I didn't expect, and it's worth mentioning because it surprised me more than the electric bill did. People hear, he bought a house in Cebu, and picture a deed with his name on it, same as buying a place back in Ohio. It doesn't quite work that way. Foreigners generally can't own land here, full stop. You can own a condominium unit outright, within certain limits, or you can lease land long-term, or build on land held in a spouse's name, But the straightforward American idea of, "I own this house," doesn't translate cleanly. I had to have that explained to me twice before it really sank in. So even the thing I thought I'd bought isn't quite mine the way my house back in Ohio was mine. And that took some getting used to. A different kind of belonging to a place, less certain on paper, even while it felt more like home than my old address ever had toward the end. I sat there a long while turning that over. The idea that in the one country I have almost nothing on paper tying me down, no mortgage, no deed, and in the other I have a Social Security number and a lifetime of credit history that's slowly going dormant, unused, like a garden nobody's watered. Neither side is clean. Neither side is fully mine. That's the part I didn't expect the legal pad to show me. So I sat there with the rain coming down and the numbers all laid out in front of me. And here's when it hit me. This wasn't a budgeting problem I could solve by cutting back a little more. I could not make the arithmetic of coming home add up to anything you'd call a livable life. Not a comfortable one, not even a modest one. Just barely, grimly surviving, alone, in somebody's basement, waiting for something. I didn't even know what. But that's not actually why I can't go back. That's just the part with numbers on it. And numbers, however cold they look on a legal pad, are still the easy part. The real reason sat underneath all of it, and it took me a lot longer to face than the math did. Here's the part I hadn't said out loud to anyone, not even to Marites, until I started putting this video together. About 8 months before that rainy Tuesday, I was scrolling through Facebook late one night, the way you do when you can't sleep and the fan's not quite cutting the heat, and I saw a memorial post for a man named Ron Kessler. Ron and I bowled together every Thursday night for almost 20 years back before I left. Good man. Terrible bowler, but a good man. The kind who'd show up with his truck if your fence blew down, no phone call needed. He'd died 4 months earlier. Heart attack, in his sleep apparently. Nobody had thought to tell me. Not because anybody was cruel about it, just because I wasn't really on anybody's list of people to call anymore. I'd become a name on a screen, not a name in the room. I sat with that a long time, longer than I want to admit. It wasn't just grief for Ron, though it was that too. It was the specific, quiet realization that an entire category of my old life had kept moving without me. The way a river keeps moving whether or not you're still standing in it. So when I finally did the math on that legal pad, I did a second tally too, one with no dollar signs on it at all. Who and what would actually be waiting for me if I went back? Kelly loves me. I want to say that plainly, because none of what I'm about to say contradicts it. But Kelly is 41, with 2 boys and a husband and a job and a life that runs at its own full speed. And the honest truth is, she doesn't need me day to day the way she did when she was young. She'd be glad to see me on a Sunday. She'd help me if I fell and broke a hip, but the daily fabric of her life doesn't have a jerry-shaped hole in it anymore, because I haven't been in it for 4 years, and life doesn't leave holes open forever. It stitches itself shut. That's not an accusation. That's just what happens. And it happens whether you retire abroad or just get old in the next town over. The hardware co-op closed 2 years after I left. I heard it became a vape shop and a nail salon, split down the middle, which still makes me laugh a little sadly every time I picture it. The diner where I used to get coffee with the same 6 retired guys every Wednesday morning, gone. Replaced by something with exposed brick and a menu I wouldn't recognize. Ron used to sit at that counter with his elbows out too wide, same seat every week, complaining good-naturedly about whatever the Reds had done wrong the night before. That counter doesn't exist anymore either. The town itself had quietly moved on, the same way Kelly's daily life had. The same way the whole world does when you stop showing up to it in person. Now let me tell you what's on the other side of that ledger, here in Cebu. There's a Tuesday evening basketball game a few blocks from my apartment. Half court, cracked pavement, a rim with no net, where a group of retired local men, most of them younger than me, but not by much, gather most weeks. I don't play anymore, my knees won't allow it. But I show up, and about a year ago, I noticed that somebody had started setting a plastic chair off to the side before I even arrived. Nobody announced it. Nobody made a thing of it. It's just there now, waiting, every Tuesday, whether I show up on time or late. There's Nana, who still leaves bread on my doorknob on Sunday mornings, and who once sat up with me through a whole feverish night during a bad bout of dengue, checking my temperature every hour without being asked, because that's simply what you do for a neighbor here. There's Marites's grandson, 6 years old, who runs up and grabs my hand on his way home from school most afternoons and walks the last block with me like it's the most natural thing in the world. Because to him, it is. He has never known a version of his family that didn't include me. And there's Marites herself, who knows exactly how I take my coffee, who caught me crying once, just once, about a year in, about Diane, out of nowhere, the way grief ambushes you sometimes, and didn't ask me to explain it, just sat with me until it passed, the same way I imagined she'd sit with anyone she loved. I want to be careful here, because I'm not telling you this to make Ohio sound cold or Cebu sound like paradise. That's not true either. Ohio is where I built 31 years of a life, where Diane and I raised Kelly, where I still ache for certain smells and certain seasons in a way nothing here replaces. And Cebu isn't paradise. It's hot and complicated, and I'm still, after 4 years, a foreigner here in ways I'll probably never stop being. I don't speak the language well. I'll never fully belong here the way Nana or Marites do. But when I laid the 2 ledgers side by side, what's waiting for me in Ohio and what's actually here day to day holding me up, it wasn't close. Not because Ohio failed me, because life, on its own schedule, had simply moved most of what used to need me somewhere else, while here, somehow, without my ever asking for it, I'd become somebody a handful of people quietly counted on, a saved chair, a grandson's hand, a woman who sat with my grief instead of asking me to explain it. That's the real reason I can't go back. Not the rent, not the car insurance, not even the health care, though all of that's true, too. It's that the specific, ordinary, unglamorous fabric of being needed by people in small daily ways, that fabric got rebuilt here, thread by thread, without me noticing it happening, while the old fabric, back home, quietly came apart the same slow way. You don't notice either one happening while you're busy living. You just wake up one day and realize which side of the ledger you actually live on now. Last month I turned 73. Marites organized a small gathering on the patio outside my apartment, Nothing fancy. Plastic chairs borrowed from the sari-sari store, a string of cheap lights she'd bought at the market and hung herself along the railing, a cake from the bakery 2 streets over with my name spelled slightly wrong in blue icing, which nobody bothered to fix and which, honestly, made me laugh harder than a correctly spelled cake ever would have. Her grown kids came. A couple of the guys from the Tuesday basketball game showed up, plastic chair and all, the same chair that waits for me every week, carried over for the occasion like it belonged there too. Nina brought a second batch of pandesat, unasked, the way she does everything. And around 8 o'clock, before it got too late for the boys back home, Kelly video-called from her kitchen table with my 2 grandsons crowded into frame, both of them talking over each other, trying to tell me about school, about a dog down their street, about nothing in particular, the way kids do. It was warm, it was short. It was exactly what a Tuesday night phone call from 4 states and 1 ocean away actually looks like. And I have stopped pretending it should look like more than that. I sat there afterward, once most people had drifted home, and it was just me and Meritess cleaning up cake plates on the patio. And I thought about the legal pad from that rainy Tuesday, still sitting somewhere in a drawer inside. I thought about Ron Kessler, and about the basketball chair, and about Kelly's kitchen table lit up on a screen 4 states away. And I didn't feel resolved exactly. I still don't, if I'm honest with you. Some nights I ache for Ohio in a way that has nothing to do with money or logistics at all. I miss the particular gray of a Midwestern November sky. I miss knowing exactly which aisle held what in my own hardware co-op. I miss Diane in ways that living here hasn't touched one way or the other, because grief doesn't care what country you're standing in. But I've made a kind of peace with not being fully at home in either place anymore. I'm not fully Ohio anymore. Too much time gone, too many streets changed, too many people who've stopped expecting me. And I'm not fully Cebu either, not really. Not in the way Nena or Marites or her grandson are. I'll always be the foreigner on this street, however welcome. I carry both places in me now, incompletely. The way you carry 2 languages you're not quite fluent in, instead of one you speak perfectly. I'm not telling you any of this so you'll feel sorry for me, and I'm genuinely not telling you it so you'll go pack a suitcase either. Some people are built for this life, and some people would be miserable inside a month. And I don't know which one you are, and neither do you, probably, until you're standing in the middle of it same as I was. What I can tell you is this. Nobody warns you that the decision isn't really a decision at all. Nobody warns you that a 3-week visit can quietly close a door behind you while you're still admiring the view. Nobody warns you that the numbers will make the choice for you long before your heart catches up to it, or that by the time you sit down with a legal pad on a rainy afternoon, the math has usually already been run somewhere underneath you without your permission. Marites came and sat next to me on the patio step, not saying anything, just resting her hand over mine the way she does when she can tell I've gone quiet inside my own head. The string lights were still on above us, that cheap market kind that never last more than a season before you're back buying another set. Somewhere down the street, a jeepney rattled past, engine loud, exhaust thick. The same sound I've fallen asleep to for 4 years now, without ever quite noticing I stopped hearing it as noise. After a while, she got up to switch off the lights, and I sat there another minute in the dark that followed, listening to the last of the jeepney fade down toward the main road, thinking that I am, at 73, further from where I started and more at home than I expected to ever be again. Both things true at the same time, neither one canceling the other out. Then I went inside, and that was that. Just an ordinary Tuesday night, same as most of them are now, which is, I've come to think, the whole point. Not a postcard, not a cautionary tale either, just a life, complicated and specific, and mine, lived on a rented patio under a string of lights that won't last the season, in a country that will never fully be home, having left one that isn't quite home anymore either. I can't go back. But some nights, sitting out there with the lights still warm above me, I'm not entirely sure back is even a place anymore, for anyone, once enough years have passed. Maybe it never was. Maybe that's the part the postcard never had room to say.